And welcome once again to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. Joining me, Juan Zarate, our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you as always.
Bob, great seeing you.
So this is a bit of a surprise, I think, to some people out of Egypt. A court there trying the former President Mubarak says he's free of murder charges.
Yeah, the murder charges against Hosni Mubarak have been dropped. These were charges leveled against him for the death of some of the protesters at the height of the protests when he was still in command. The charges were that he had commanded or ordered that they be killed or at least attacked, and those charges have been dropped. That is a major signal that you not only have a shift in the case itself, but that you have a shift in the order in Egypt. And really the fact is that the military and the old order are now reigning supreme. And this is a very good manifestation and an example of that, where the judge and the court system are not going to hold Hosni Mubarak responsible for what happened during those protests. And that's a real signal that the military is really back in charge.
Is that acceptable on the street, though? I mean, we know what happened in 2011. Pretty brutal crackdown. A lot of people were killed. And now here's a court saying, well, the guy at the top of the food chain there is not responsible.
Well, ideally, you would have some accountability. Somebody would be held accountable for the deaths of those protesters, whether it's Hosni Mubarak or somebody in the military chain of command who ordered it or who was overseeing
it was his regime, though, right?
Right, it was his regime, and that was the argument from the prosecutors. The reality, though, Bob, is that the voices of those who've called for that reform have really been silenced and squelched. The new order under President Sisi has been pretty strong, and some would say brutal in terms of suppressing opposition. Not just the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been severe, but also liberal voices. And so you're not likely going to see protests or a lot of voices of opposition to what's happened. In addition, he's still in jail. Mubarak is still in jail. He's serving a sentence for embezzlement. And so that, in some ways, may quell some of the passions around having these charges dropped.
Where is Egypt going? I mean, I know that's a big, broad question, but what's your sense of what happens next there?
Egypt, in some ways, continues to be a bellwether for the region. We've talked about the success story of Tunisia, that running relatively well with moderate Islamists making accommodations and elections happening peacefully. The chaos of Libya, Somalia on the Mediterranean, as we've called it. And then Egypt, which really is the dominant Arab force in the region. Moving towards some degree of stability, some degree of economic growth, but a lot of questions about the political stability of that regime. And the question is, can they really suppress their way out of the chaos we've seen over the last 2 years? Is the Muslim Brotherhood really going to be suppressed? And what of these violent groups that are emerging that have deeper ties to al-Qaeda and some even claiming ties to the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria? And so this is a country in still a bit of turmoil. It hasn't gotten its feet under it, and lots of questions politically as to where it's going.
Is Egypt at risk of becoming a terror state? Because that would be a terrible thing for the world.
I don't think so. I think what you're going to see is the military preventing that from happening. I mean, the one silver lining to having the military sort of back in charge is they are going to take the fight to military groups, whether they're the groups in the Sinai or emerging elsewhere. And so Egypt is not going to allow itself to become a safe haven. I think the broader question is, long-term, what is the political future of Egypt, especially with such a broad swath of the population now suppressed under Sisi's rule?
When you're choosing between terrorism and totalitarian oppression, it's not a great pick.
Yeah, and the populace has wanted reforms, has wanted to deal with corruption, with the economy, and with security, and all of that is still at play.
An ongoing story we'll come back to many times. Juan, thanks.
Got to watch it.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.